My name is Adam Olson from HeroX, and I want to thank everyone for tuning in live to Innovation Heroes today. We're very excited about this space with our special guests and partner, 100% Open. 100% Open is a leader in the innovation space. They help organizations create new products and services by connecting them to the best people, ideas, and technologies in the world. And they've proven that it's the most efficient, creative, and fastest way to be innovating. Today, we are joined by David Smoes-Brown, founder and CEO of 100% Open, to discuss how organizations can leverage open innovation to optimize their return on innovation, as we refer to it, ROI. So welcome, David. Thank you so much for taking the time today to join us. Before we get started, can you share a little bit about yourself and the 100% Open story?
Thank you. Yes, I will. I'm a co-founder of 100% Open just over 13 years ago. So there's something in it. So we've been really at the forefront of open innovation specialist services for way over a decade. And the company had an unusual birth. We were working with the British government sponsored organisation called NESTA, National Endowment for Science, Technology and the Arts. And they did a wonderful thing. They gave me some resource and space to experiment with this newfangled thing, open innovation. Could it work? Was it suitable for the UK? What kind of tools and techniques would you need to make it a success? So that was a wonderful piece of freedom, and it worked. It worked well. So I span out from Nesta 13 years ago, and since then, we've been really trying to remain at the forefront of open innovation. It's very easy as an innovation agency to not innovate yourself. So the big challenge has been to create new tools, new techniques, new ways of bringing clients value since then. So we're a small organisation with a large network. So we have getting on for 100 associates around the globe, all helping their clients do open innovation. I think it's probably enough to give you a bit of context for now.
Amazing. Thank you for the bio. And that is certainly one thing I really enjoy about you and your team, all the tools you provide and the education. So if any of our listeners haven't checked out the 100% Open site, there's lots of resources they have on there. I'd love to get a little bit more insight into how you approach supporting different organizations. You mentioned you work with a number of different ones, so maybe you could elaborate a little further on that.
Thank you, Adam. I will. Yes. So we basically do four things. So it's quite a short list. So bear with me if I just itemize it. So the thing that we work on together, which is exciting, is our crowds offer. So we don't have a platform. That's why we have great partners like HeroX. What we do have is a whole bunch of know-how for the services component of running an open innovation challenge. How you design it, how you reward it, how you position it, how you communicate it, how it all works. And clients, whether they're new to open innovation or experienced, often benefit from a sort of service element to crowds. Jams are our second offer. Jams are increasingly, almost exclusively at the moment, online creative and diverse workshops. So the idea is it's a bit like a bunch of jazz musicians following their inspiration. So it's workshops, but not as we know it. Think is our third offer, and as you might imagine, that involves strategic investigation into pretty much anything to do with open innovation. The most question we get asked, the most often question we get asked is why should we do open innovation? So what's the use case? What's the business case for open innovation? Is it worth it for us? Is it the right kind of technique for us? So that's a really good strategy project where we go into the business case for open innovation. More of which later. And the last service line is Learn, where we have somewhat accidentally got into culture change and mindset shift within organizations, because we didn't set up to be a a sort of didactic organization. We set up to be a practical organization. But actually, it turns out that unless a culture in a company is well prepared for open innovation, it doesn't work. You've got to have the right networks, the right mindsets, the right attitudes, the right what we call business empathy between large and small organizations. And once all that's in place, things tend to click. So yeah, we've found ourselves over the years doing more and more culture change work as well. So that's the four things. I hope that was brief enough to be not painful.
No, that was great. Thank you, David. And what you said is really important because there are so many components to being ready to successfully adopt open innovation. There's the culture, there's the right projects, there's the right platforms and partners. There are a lot of things that really come into play when organizations are starting to navigate their way down this road. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so that being said, I'm sure you've had a lot of very successful projects and some exciting industries you've worked in. Are there any specific technologies or industries that you've been seeing a lot of interesting innovation happening in right now?
Oh, that's a difficult one. Yes, lots. And I'm sure you guys have got even more insight with your amazing work with NASA and others. But I suppose um, it's sort of more product than service innovation. I could definitely say that. Um, and quite a lot of deep tech um, innovation that requires the inputs of many different moving parts. So, for example, we've been doing a bit of work for a thing called the Digital Twin Hub run by Cambridge University. And that's a crowd that is a community of 3,000 sort of digital digital types from the built environment uh, uh, sector and from universities and from startups, uh, all trying to create digital twins of physical infrastructure. In fact, that particular client, correct. Okay, and that's pretty ambitious. And it involves, of course, not just tech, although that's its point. It involves culture, it involves connection, it involves collaboration, it involves connectivity. So what starts off as a kind of deep tech project, it seems to me, always ends up being about um, cultural collaboration and, in some cases, intellectual property. So that's quite. And there's many other examples I could give on deep tech. The other thing that was overperforming was government-based open innovation. So, and I'll probably talk a bit more about this later. We've been working in the UK and in other places with procurement teams in government departments, looking at how they can diversify and open their supply chains to smaller companies. That's kind of exciting, actually. And I know you've got lots of experience working with the US government, so you can probably teach me a few things there. And lastly, FMCG, fast moving consumer goods. We've done a lot of work in finance and other sectors like that. But FMCG seem to be embracing open innovation a little more. I don't know whether it's pressures on cost or speed to market or simply just there being enough case studies around for them to feel comfortable. But so those are the sort of three trends. I think deep tech, government kind of procurement and collaboration, and fast moving consumer goods companies getting into a more rapid innovation cycle, I'd say. Oh, there's one more I forgot, which is defence. So yeah, very unlikely, but you might think, sector to do open innovation because often they're closed, and we've had a reasonable amount of success trying to kind of open up innovation in certain defence organisations as well. So that's sort of four types of industry and tech that we've had recent or interesting experience with.
Very interesting. Yeah, we've done some work with in the defense industry as well, and it is very a unique experience because they are typically so closed off.
Mm.
But it is nice to see industries and organizations in such a traditionally closed environment starting to open up. I think that's a really great sign for the industry.
I
And,
agree
you
with you.
know, it's,
The same
yeah, yeah.
same is true in banking to a certain extent. A sector that's built on secrecy and trust. Uh, Relative
Mm,
latecomer. My farmer has been doing open innovation since before it was even invented. So that's a fantastic set of examples. But
yeah.
yeah, certainly we're seeing finance, defence, other sectors chipping in now.
Yeah, yeah, that's amazing. And you know, we've worked with a variety of interesting industries as well. Like you mentioned, NASA, a lot of cool projects have
Mm,
come down
mm.
with what they're working on. They've been crowdsourcing and doing open innovation for years and years, and they find a lot of success in it. You know, we do a lot of government work and you know, mining. We've done some pharma as well,
Hmm.
but you know, all these industries, like their projects, they can really look so different and unique to one another, and that's where, you know, being able to figure out like did they have a good return on innovation, like was this a successful project, like it
Mm,
can
mm.
be also very different when you're comparing, you know, apples to oranges, because like the projects can be so night and day. So when we look at ROI, like how do you typically measure success, or is it really just on a case by case basis?
That's a great question. And if you'd asked me that a year ago, I'd be giving you a completely different answer. I'm sort of in our naivety in the early days, created this whole suite of tools for you know for doing effective open innovation. And because my background's in advertising planning, so and if anyone knows what that is, it is the strategy of communications, but also the effectiveness of communications. So in advertising, we're really um, uh, keen on proving to the clients whether it's worked and how it's worked. In innovation, not so much. It's kind of an article of faith. A lot of companies innovate and just point to the products and go, "Look, we innovated that." Whether that cost $10 million to produce and it's only sold five, it doesn't seem to matter. So there's less rigor, if I may say so. Probably insulting over half my audience here. There seems to be less rigor in innovation compared to communications and other things. And so what we did in a naivety was we produced a tool in our 100% open toolkit, and I think we may be tweeting the link to that kit and the tool uh, right now, and it stayed there in the kit, dusty, for the first 8 9 years of its existence. No one was interested. No one was interested in looking at you know methodically the return on innovation that you're getting. And actually, this isn't a thing that's just restricted to open innovation. It's quite hard to find um, that many companies, organizations, really rigorously measuring their innovation returns. Um, so anyway, but recently it's been out of the cupboard, our tool, and it's been dusted off, and we've been using it kind of left, right, and center. So what I'll do is I'll just sort of, I'll lay out one or two of the principles of the metrics tool. The first key thing about open innovation metrics, and I cannot emphasize this enough, is that you measure the benefits and the costs to you, of course, but you also measure and take responsibility for the benefits and costs to your open innovation partner. Okay, because open innovation is a give-get thing. It isn't about just grabbing as much IP as you can and running for the hills. It's creating long-term stable relationships based on a fair um, exchange of value. So when you're measuring the exchange of value, we say you have to measure that exchange of value from both perspectives. So you say, right, well, what are the benefits to us uh, if it's UBS, say Swiss Bank? So here are the benefits to us. We get new products, we get new partners, we get possibly new customers, greater loyalty, whatever it is. Well, the cost to us, well, it costs us 100 grand to run the competition or whatever it is, and they can work out a formula more or less um, to see whether that worked or not. But if you don't measure the cost and benefits to your new partners, the relationship isn't going to last very long. So it won't be a fulfilling relationship. And also that will affect your reputation as people to do business with in terms of open innovation. So principle number one, measure the benefits and the costs from both perspectives, and then have a jam, have a workshop, work through the list, make sure you both sides agree what you're going to get out of it and what you're going to put into it, and then you've got a set of things to measure. So we have the tool, Open Innovation Metrics tool, which you might get a link to on Twitter. Just contains a list of things and a formula. So we ask people to say, what are the top 3 benefits to both us and our innovation partner? Are we actually after better quality of ideas? Are we after sustainability of revenue? Are we after a reduced time to market? Are we after better customer satisfaction? What's the thing we're trying to do? And in terms of the partner, are we after more revenue? Are we after security of supply, etc.? So you both have an open conversation about that, and then you look at the costs. Who's paying for this challenge? Who pays for the distribution and marketing? Where does the network and scouting costs come from? If you're doing some venturing, who invests in what? Where does the money for the resources for production of the thing come from? So what you end up with is a whole bunch of things that you can then measure. And open innovation value is simply the benefits of you and your partner divided by the costs of you and your partner. And you can work out whether the whole thing was worth it. So that's what we'd recommend in terms of value. That's easy for me to say and actually quite difficult to do. What we found with a particular FMCG company in Italy the week before last was that their avowed intent was to drive up customer satisfaction using open innovation, and that was easy because they measured it. They had the insight team knew what customer satisfaction was. But the other thing was about they wanted was increased speed to market, but they had never measured their speed to market before for innovation. So that requires setting up a whole bunch of metrics within the organization, having someone responsible for them, and then diligently kind of recording the speed to market. And then after a while, you can compare, speed to market of open innovation versus closed innovation. So and that they did a very brave thing. We had a workshop with them and some of their supply chain, and we worked out that open innovation metrics with the customer and their suppliers together in the open, and that worked very well. So that's the short answer. There's a tool for it. It contains 2 or 3 key principles that you should adhere to, and it's relatively unused because people haven't cared about it until recently. So get in there now.
Yeah, no, that's great, David, because it is such a complex thing to do, and innovation can be like you can innovate in so many different ways around so many different areas of a company, and the goals and the outcomes that you're trying to achieve are different. So, do you have metrics around those? Like, what does success look like for each project? And it's a very complex thing, and it's amazing that you and your team have managed to kind of simplify that into a tool that is based around certain principles, and it's able to kind of provide a little bit of guidance for organizations.
How do you guys do it? Because I'm really talking about output metrics. So, what happens as a result of the open innovation. I guess HeroX, you know what a good challenge looks like in terms of response and sort of engagement and all that stuff. So we have less knowledge about the kind of mechanics of the challenge and more knowledge about the strategy of what's required and kind of what happens. So do you have a feeling for what a kind of lively competition is and some kind of benchmarks, or how does it work with HeroX?
Yeah, so for HeroX, it's a little bit more clearly defined, I suppose, in the early stages of running a project, because we work very closely with challenge design and really outlining like what success looks like at the end of this project. So we really know, okay, if we're working with NASA, and a project I just worked on with them was supporting them in designing a new ash management system for their trash removal system on a spacecraft. And they basically said, what success looks like at the end of this is some new innovations on how we can continue to reduce the garbage that gets produced by astronauts in space. So they basically had a machine that got it to a certain ash component, and then they wanted to further reduce that or be able to repurpose it before they had to store it or put it outside of the ship or whatever it may be. So they knew exactly what they were looking for, the components they needed. Like we really framed the challenge for the crowd to ultimately know, okay, in order to win this prize, this is exactly like this is what we need to hit. These are the judging criterias. And then so at the end of the day, if we successfully built a crowd around the project, we would have um, a solid number of submissions. Although we don't really base a success of a project around quantity of submissions, it's more so quality. You know, we've
Hmm.
had some challenges come in with 100 submissions, and maybe only a handful of them are good and
Right.
hitting those marks. And on the flip side, we've had some challenges where you might only get 5 to 10 submissions, and
Hmm.
it's almost impossible to pick a winner because they're all so good. So really, like that's why it's a little bit more clear, I suppose, in the work we do, because we work so closely like up front to really define what that success looks like, and then on the
Right.
back end, they've kind of figured out, what that monetary value is to those solutions, and that's
Hmm.
what the prize is that they attach to it.
Okay, great. That sounds like we have parallel processes, which is good.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think it is about starting at the end, is what we say. So um, a lot of people go into innovation projects starting at the beginning, going, well, let's invent something and see what we can do with it, which is fine if you're an inventor or possibly if you're an SME. If you're a corporation, less so. You've got to start with the intended um, effect uh, of that innovation. So you've got to have a really clear unmet need from users. You've got to innovate towards a goal rather than from a point. I think that's the thing. So our most successful projects are where we agree the strategy and the objectives really clearly up front with the client, which it sounds like you guys sort of do as well.
Are there any examples of some interesting organizations you've worked with recently that produced some good results?
Yeah, we've had a long-term relationship with UBS, the Swiss bank. I mentioned them before, going back 5 or 6 years, and it's been really interesting to see how they've changed culturally and in terms of connecting with the marketplace globally over that time. And it's a privilege to be able to have been um, in that seat watching it happen. And I'm sure they wouldn't mind me saying that initially the open innovation that they were doing, the Future of Finance Challenge that we run, was as much about profile and creating a buzz than it was about actually accessing new fantastic fintech. Indeed, in the first when we launched, they were top of the Twitter charts in Zurich in Switzerland, which was surprised everybody. So that worked. It raised their profile. It said, "Hey, we're open for business, literally, and we want to serve our clients, as well as any um, uh, financial institution can." Um, uh, but the first couple of years, I mean, it wasn't hugely successful in terms of deals done with fintechs. Um, and that was, I'll talk about this later a bit. It was more about having the infrastructure and the expectation within the organization to assimilate and deal with and cope with actually uh, uh, startups, because they obviously, if you're a startup, you're a completely different mindset and uh, different stage of development of all sorts of things. And what they have now, fast forward, is a highly successful machine, really, which is global, which contains places on an accelerator that winning fintechs can join, which includes mentors and coaches from within the UBS organization helping fintechs, through the competition process, and most importantly, uh, an evidence requirement from within the business to which innovators are drawn. So, um, there's a competition for something that they really need rather than they would quite like, and that those three cultural factors have been, you know, uh, sort of increasing steps on the success ladder for UBS's future finance. So moving from, seeking connections to seeking business partners, really, and then having the the courage and the vision and openness to set up a landing strip within the organisation, several landing strips to support SMEs, and that's been, I think, a privilege to be alongside that for 5 or 6 years. I could say more, but that's probably enough for, for that.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. It is very interesting to see the cultural shifts. One thing we've really been seeing a lot lately is organizations really trying to use open innovation to tackle sustainable issues or to like push
Mm,
their
mm,
sustainability goals. And
mm,
I think
mm.
just about every large organization has put out some pretty ambitious net zero goals.
Mm.
Have you been working with any companies to help reach these goals? If so, how are you guys approaching it?
It's in every conversation, Adam. It's absolutely, and quite right too. I mean, I'd be ashamed of the industry if we weren't talking about sustainability the whole time. It's urgent and important and existential. In fact, I'm. It's kind of hard as a small business, but I'm trying to say yes more to contracts that are, that have that as their goal rather than others. But yeah, we've worked with a variety of different organisations. I'll just pick three briefly. So there's one organisation which is set up to do this kind of thing called the Energy Systems Catapult in the UK, and it's quite an obscure thing, but their remit is to transform the whole of the UK's energy system. And you may not know in the UK, but it's part privatised. There's a national grid that looks after distribution. There's a whole bunch of energy generation companies, and it's a bit disjointed. And therefore, to think of a system that makes it more efficient, more decarbonised, and more collaborative, really, and more responsive to customers' needs, is quite an ask in such an environment. So we've been working with them to uh, uh, to help them find, forgive the pun, but sparky startups which are able to deliver parts of that puzzle. So um, monitoring consumption, helping consumers reduce their use of power, but all the way through to looking at how to reconfigure the national grid, how to make sure that renewable energy can be utilised at the appropriate time and so forth. So there's an organisation that I love to work with that has a direct effect on our ability to go green. A slightly more tangential case from a couple of years back, I mentioned it because it was in the States, was working with Ford to look at essentially a transition from motors to mobility. So if you're a car company, that basically at the moment what you're doing is you're selling private vehicles that consume a lot of energy, whether it's fossil fuels or whether it's electric. And part of what we were doing with the cities challenges, we're working in Detroit and New York and other places to involve the community in solving their own transportation issues. So looking at what's wrong with transportation in Detroit, for example, it was mainly access to public transport. There basically isn't any, or wasn't any. And so it's being a car company, not just making your money from selling petrol-based automotive products, but taking a more lateral view of what your role as a company is. It's about getting people from A to B, right? Not about producing cars. So that was super interesting. And of course, in that is a lot of sustainability. Are a lot of sustainability outcomes. The other thing we've been doing is trying to help the UK startups export smart cities solutions to different parts of the world. So we've been scouring the UK for really good, the best UK startups who are looking at decarbonisation, amongst other things, on a city scale, and then coaching them, mentoring them, preparing meetings for them in places like Shanghai and Malaysia and Australia, all over the world, and then trying to capitalize on the UK's expertise in smart cities to create global links. So there's a number of different ways you can do this. You can work with organizations that are directly involved in being green and greener, like ESC. You can work in transforming organizations that have a model that's dependent on the old way of doing things, like Ford. And you can look at promoting brilliance from within any different community and exporting. And that's all about scaling up brilliance, really, because it's no good just sitting there in a room with your own brilliant invention. It has to reach the marketplace. So that's three angles, I think, if that works for you.
Yeah, no, that's great. Like, it really painted an interesting picture of the different ways sustainability is being tackled, and we see it a lot too ourselves. We just ran a really interesting challenge with Coinbase, who they just kind of went out and they said, we're looking for new innovative ways to leverage blockchain technology. So they didn't even really say, like, have ambitious sustainability goals, but some of the solutions they had were very sustainability based, and it was really cool to see that's where a lot of the global innovators community mindset was. One of the winners that I thought was really interesting was they used blockchain technology to put together this grid in a community that would help either share or sell, like, solar power. So if you had solar panels on your house, you would be able to, like, share that power or, like, excess power with your neighbor, or sell it to someone down the street, or things like that. And I thought that was really unique. And
nice.
And then we also, we ran 3 challenges at the same time with NASA, all around reducing space waste. So even though there's sustainability and waste reduction innovations happening down here on Earth, there's a lot of waste in space right now, and a lot of organizations are focusing on that. We've also done work with the Singapore government and the U.S. government, and a lot of their innovation goals are very sustainability focused. So that's the kind of work I love doing. As you mentioned, I think it's really important. It's urgent. So it's awesome to see that it's at the forefront of a lot of these organizations.
It certainly is, and it's a privilege to work with organizations that are big and powerful enough to actually make a difference if you can scale good ideas. And I think that's where open innovation can really support the green agenda. Is getting the best ideas to market fastest, rather than sort of fairly slow traditional ways of getting things to market.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Shifting gears a little bit now, we touched on this earlier about the defense industry being a little bit closed off, and banking industries, and there are some organizations and industries that are a little bit more hesitant than others to dive into open innovation. And one thing that we've seen a lot is the hesitation around innovation can sometimes be a race amongst competitors. It can really be, okay, who gets to the market quickest with a new product or a new innovation. And so sometimes companies are a little hesitant to go open because their competitors might be getting eyes on what they're doing, and then they might steal their ideas. Have you found that certain organizations have had a tough time adopting open innovation because they're nervous about showing their hand to their competitors, or giving insight into what they're working on?
That's interesting. Not so much nervous now, although that definitely, about 5 or 10 years ago, people who are new to open innovation thought, oh gosh, that means I have to open everything to everybody. And I remember having a conversation with a particular chocolate manufacturer around that time, and they were adamant that they didn't want to let the competition know what they were lacking, therefore wouldn't publish any challenges. That, however, has completely changed. And I suppose the key impediments now are mostly cultural. So innovators in the audience will know if I mention NIH, not invented here syndrome, or NMH, I've just learned about, which is not manufactured here. So there's lots of companies that pride themselves on inventiveness and R&D, and that's part of their value and DNA and contribution. So it's odd if you suddenly get a bunch of innovations from outside. It's like the R&D scientists are thinking, well, what am I here for? So there's a kind of natural innovation antibodies in some organizations that resist external ideas. And there's Henry Chesbrough, who's the godfather of open innovation. He draws diagrams of organizations with sort of perforations around them, so the inflow and outflow of ideas is not impeded by this sort of false skin of not invented here. And what we seek to encourage companies to think about is proudly invented elsewhere, not invented here. So proudly invented elsewhere means we have been clever enough to recognize value in something, saved a whole bunch of money by not developing it ourselves. We've made some people wealthy who are our partners, who are now, when we've provided a scale solution for that, and therefore we've benefited our shareholders and our customers faster. So if the game really is, being ahead of the competition, then open innovation can help you do that. If you're not too proud to accept external suppliers. And in fact, what's happening, I'm thinking about fintechs. We've just been talking about UBS. The market's got so complicated and it's so fast moving. It's difficult for large organizations to keep up. Every time I look at blockchain and distributed ledger, and there's a whole 20 applications for it, and it seems every 10 minutes. So how organizations can keep up with that level of pace, it's really hard. So I think people, as the pace of acceleration accelerates, open innovation becomes more and more part of the armory, I think. But I have something to share with you here, which I was doing a project with a FMCG company recently, and they asked me to look at if there's any research on what makes for effective open innovation. So can you benchmark for us what good looks like? And I found this tremendous piece of research from 2016, because we forget this is a relatively young industry, right? And it was called Benchmarking Best Practices in OI by Gord and Prakash. Gord, G-A-W-E, and Prakash. And it blew my socks off, because they measured the contribution of different things to a successful open innovation challenge. They're probably, if they're sitting there thinking this is an oversimplification, but there you go. So they looked at, is platform design very important? What about choosing the right target audience? Clearly, motivation and incentive is an important thing. What about the consequence of the challenge? Sponsor engagement has an effect, of course, and company culture might have an effect too. So they put in these six factors into their research design, and found something absolutely fascinating, which was that of these 6 factors, it's company culture that is the key determinant of whether open innovation is a success. In fact, company culture, I'm sorry about this, Adam, because you guys run a platform, is 5 times more important than platform design for determining the success of open innovation. Isn't that an amazing fact? And I can't. So, what does culture mean? I could talk about that a bit, but culture is more important than the consequence of the innovation. So, the effectiveness, more important than getting the target audience right, more important than motivation and incentive, and more important than sponsor engagement. So, if you know that, then your approach to open innovation sort of design and thinking about it, I suspect will radically change. So going back to the UBS example, it's the culture of openness and supportiveness and connectedness that really has made a difference for them, not really the platform we used, our own platform, or anything like that. I think a little humility from us platform owners would go would go a long way. But we both have a responsibility to talk about culture and think about culture in the organizations we support.
That's incredible stats, and you'll certainly get the humility from me. Like we at HeroX, we hire almost strictly based on culture. So we
Ah,
certainly see the importance in it and the value in having a strong and aligned company culture. And we do, like you said, it's part of our job to have those conversations with organizations that are getting into open innovation because it does hold a huge importance.
mm,
And I think having like going out and getting ideas from the world, however you approach that is one thing, but it's what you do with those ideas and solutions and
mm,
innovations in-house when you get them, that really makes the difference. So if you found the perfect platform and you've built the perfect crowd and you get the amazing solutions and your company culture isn't set up to capitalize on these new innovations that you get,
mm, mm.
I've seen it happen quite a few times before. Like those things will fall flat. It's quite
Yeah,
unfortunate because you do all this work up front, you invest this time and money, and you get the results, but you're not set up internally to really further develop them. And
uh,
um, I know that's where you spend a lot of time helping your clients, post getting those ideas. Is that correct?
yes, yeah, it is. Well, we, as I said before, we try to start at the end. So we look at what's called innovators called the landing strip within organizations. So have you got the capabilities to actually, so for example, GSK, a British drug company, has or had last time I looked a team of about 20 people whose sole job is to manage open innovation relationships with startups they're working with. So it's a full-time job for a lot of people to make sure those relationships thrive, and it's all post-competition. And make sure that IP is correctly assigned, make sure everyone's happy, make sure nobody starves, make sure milestones are hit. So that's organizational know-how that is part of culture. And if you don't have that, the SME turns up blinking one Monday morning, go, hey, I won, and people are looking at them going, well, nobody asked for you. Uh, I've got no budget for you. Uh,
Mhm.
Off you go. So yes, absolutely. We try and start at the end, trying to find the key thing, key thing here is to find somebody in an organization who's your um, uh, sponsor, for want of a better expression. Challenge holder, we call it. And that challenge holder has to be in some kind of pain, really. Sorry to
Yeah.
say, but they have a burning requirement, not a nice to have, but a must have. And if you can find that, isolate that person in the company, the whole value of the thing becomes super apparent to them, and they will be waiting in that reception with open arms for the SME, not kind of folded arms and asking, who are you? So I think it's about that really, and that's germane to what we're talking about today, the ROI, because if you've made a business case, if you've got some numbers about a return on investment, then um, you're going to be more likely to put some effort in and some resources into looking after that relationship and making sure it matures.
One last question for you, David.
Hmm.
We've been seeing huge increases in government budgets around open innovation over the
Mm,
years,
mm,
especially in, I would say, the last 2 years. And we feel this is a great indicator for what's kind of to come in more of the enterprise world as well.
mm.
Where do you see, the innovation or open innovation industry in the next 5 years?
That's very interesting. I agree with you. I think that the whole world of government procurement is, and I'm talking not just about the UK, but other governments around the world. It's set up to be fair, but not necessarily open. So governments will increasingly buy services and products from large organisations, and they don't really trust, I think, open innovation to deliver results for them. So so I think, and there's that. So we've been getting involved in the whole world of procurement, which is different. So our clients normally aren't procurement people; they are innovation people. And if you deal with procurement people, there's a whole different set of criteria that they use. So it's all about compliance and transparency and competition and driving the price down in order to create a supply chain that is reliable and cheap. But what we're seeing is a radical transformation from supply chains to supply nets. Imagine rather than having one supply chain which is reliant on several companies passing a thing on, if you had a supply net that would compete and collaborate and give you multiple buying points all contracted to you, that's a whole different and more stable way to run an organization and business. We call it open procurement, 100% open procurement, and it's a way of, I think, the open innovation industry maturing beyond innovation into actually helping companies to run their everyday business as well. And that's a little bit pretentious, I know, but you did ask me about the future. So, and one of the things that's driving that is some new legislation in Europe called the due diligence legislation, which means your supply chain has to be super transparent and prove all the way back to the first thing that's ever made, that there's been no child labour involved, that there's a kind of a full set of ethics there, that you're carbon neutral, and that you can prove audit your entire supply chain. That is a revolution in terms of how manufacturers in particular will see their procurement systems, and adding openness to that can only improve, and allowing suppliers to compete on ethics as well as dollars. It would seem to me to be a sensible step forward. So yeah, I think open innovation has matured. It's now a thing. It's now actually people are wanting to measure it rather than have a faith in it, which is great, which is what we've been talking about. And it's also, I think, about to break out of its box into mainstream procurement rather than simply the sort of getting the latest innovations into companies.
I wouldn't call it pretentious at all. We're
You're too kind.
We're in the game of innovating and forward thinking and thinking into the future. So we have to envision that and embody that ourselves. So I really appreciate kind of getting into your mind and your thoughts on where you see the future going.
Likewise.
And on that note, I think that's a great spot for us to finish up today. David, a huge thank you to you for your time and your insights. It was an absolute pleasure hosting you, as well as thank you again to our listeners who have tuned in. If you have any immediate questions, please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Again, my name is Adam Olson, or tweet at HeroX or 100% Open. We are always happy to chat and elaborate on some of the topics that we touched on today. As mentioned earlier, we have that free tool that 100% Open has willingly provided to all of our interested listeners. You can find that download link over on the 100% Open Twitter. I believe they just tweeted that out recently, so it should be top of the feed. Keep an eye out for the recording and conversation highlights to share with your friends and colleagues. They will be released in the coming weeks. Before we jump off, David, any final comments?
Thank Magda, who's our marketing executive, who's been behind the scenes helping you making it all happen. So thank you to you, and thanks to everyone that's tuned in. It's been really, really great fun, and good luck with the next interviews. I'll be tuning in with interest. You can bet.
Perfect. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.